Välkommen till Insynspodden. Det här är en intervju med Greg Batcheller, nuvarande ordförande i skandalomsusade Intellego. Greg har meddelat att han kommer lämna sitt uppdrag som ordförande innan mars 2026. Samtalet spelades in efter att det blivit känt att bolaget utsatts för omfattande oegentligheter. Intervjun handlar om styrelsens roll, vilka antaganden som gjordes och hur man i efterhand ser på beslut som fattades. Jag har själv valt att låta stora delar av samtalet vara okommenterat. Lyssnaren får därmed själv avgöra vad som är rimligt och vad som inte är rimligt. För att förstå sammanhanget vill jag börja med Gregs roll i bolaget. As chairman of the board, what were your actual responsibilities?
What I focused on was corporate governance, compliance, those kind of activities, financing plus China.
Här pratar vi om hur Greg ser på styrelsens roll och sitt ansvar som ordförande. How did you see your task when it came to questioning what the CEO and management told you? Where was the line between trusting them and checking things out yourself?
Yeah, of course you have to check things yourself, but you don't start with the assumption that the CEO is a fraud. You never do that. So we were definitely checking out things, particularly the commercial terms, the nature of the market niche, who are our customers, the payment terms, and things like that. And also the deliveries.
I nästa del av samtalet kommer vi in på vad som faktiskt diskuterades och vad som inte diskuterades. The deliveries.
Yeah.
But what deliveries?
No, deliveries of goods or equipment, particularly these UV equipment.
But in my understanding, there hasn't been any significant deliveries at all.
Exactly.
So what was your point then?
Yeah, because we didn't know, did we?
Yeah, but you said
I mean, it's not like we knew this was a giant fraud. We didn't have to check out the stuff that was fraudulent. We were asking, for example, with Moviomed, these machines, can we deliver them? Do we have them? And the answer was yes, we've already delivered them. And there's a document that shows delivery, confirms delivery from a third party, which now you have to assume is a forgery.
The previous years, what about those deliveries? In terms of you checking it out?
Yeah, same thing.
So you got confirmation that deliveries were made, but they weren't?
We have lots of confirmations about a lot of things that weren't.
Okay, so did you meet or talk to any customers or partners except for Likang?
No, I think Likang was the main one. May have talked to one more in China. And we did talk to a potential customer.
So you didn't talk to any of the companies that made the big orders in 2025?
No.
Okay. At what point did you personally realize that something was not right?
November 18th, 2025.
Okay, when Klaus got arrested.
Exactly.
Okay, was there a period when you felt that something did not quite add up before that date, even if you couldn't clearly say what it was?
No, we have been taking a number of steps to improve the company's functions. We have brought in Deloitte to do the audit. We have brought in a CFO. We had a list of improvements to make. And, those things were underway. What I saw was a growing company with growing pains that needed to raise the standards. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, but Did you actually feel that something did not quite add up at a certain point in the 2.5 years?
November 18th.
Okay, so nothing before that. You never felt that something was...
No, never. Never. You have to remember that we had some journalists who were writing about us and questioning things about our business. And of course, we took that on board. And we made inquiries around that. We did not, of course, suspect fraud and forgery. And we had many affirmations from different parties that everything in Intellego was okay. So, for example, 2024, Deloitte does a thorough audit.
Yeah.
And they come with a clean audit. They contacted every large accounts receivable that we had to confirm the state of the account. Do you have this contract? Have you received the goods? Do you acknowledge the debt? Every single one came back with a confirmation. Then we had to move our banking to Nordea, and we wanted to get credit facilities, which we got. And they did a due diligence that lasted probably 9 months. And they came back and said, everything's okay, we'll lend you 30 million or 50 million, I can't remember. Then we had EKN, SEK, when they guarantee invoices, they do a due diligence. They said it's okay. There was many ways in which our information was affirmed and confirmed that we took comfort from.
But how can the customers verify that a product has been delivered when it actually hasn't?
Yeah, but that's a question you have to ask. And the answer is probably because Klaus manipulated them.
All of them?
Yeah, this is massive. People say, like, how couldn't you know? We didn't know. We didn't have any idea. November 18th, I got off an airplane, I turned on my phone. This was a shock to me, total shock. And it was the same for the other board members. And that's the way these kind of frauds happen. And like I said, I compared him to Bernie Madoff. If, for 1 second, we thought that was what was happening, don't you think we would have shut this down instantly? There can be one guy like Klaus, but surrounded by auditors, accountants, and lawyers, and professional board people. So, of course, we would have shut this down.
From the period when you entered the board as a chairman in mid-2023, there were a lot of question marks and attention from the media. Cash flow, customer payments, receivables, the size of partners, and the fact that the company often didn't want to name the partners. And the fact that none of the board members have actually contacted any of the customers, that raises some question marks.
Yeah. So it's not true that none of the board members contacted any of the customers.
Neither you or Möller-Ström.
I've been in contact with Likang, which was a very good contact. It confirmed a lot. The problem is you're looking with hindsight. And by the way, when it comes to other customers, we have in contact through Möller-Ström, for example.
But what do you mean by that?
He's been in contact.
To whom was he in contact?
I don't want to say because we have some sensitive relationships we're working to maintain. I will leave it at that.
But is it any more customers than Henkel?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into it. Oh, by the way, Fonzizos being a very high-profile supporter, and he actually traveled to meetings with Klaus and called customers and did stuff like that.
You say all the customers confirmed that there had been deliveries.
Yes. All the customers confirmed that those accounts receivable were exactly as stated.
But the deliveries of 4 different orders of 100 million SEK, are you saying that all of those customers confirmed that the volume that amounts to that has been delivered?
I haven't seen the exact wording of what Deloitte used. We don't get involved in that. That was directly between Deloitte and the customer. We're actually not allowed to interfere in that.
Okay. When Deloitte was not yet the auditor, how did that affect how confident you felt in the information that was communicated internally and to the market?
It didn't affect my confidence. We had a certified auditor. The reason to switch to Deloitte is the company's growing.
How did you understand the agreements with larger customers and partners? Were they binding purchases, call-off agreements, framework agreements?
Yeah. Well, what we saw were binding purchase orders without conditions. Period.
All of them binding.
Ja.
Samtalet går därefter över till intäkter, bokföring och de antaganden som låg bakom. Okay. When large order values were communicated to the market, what did those numbers mean in your understanding?
This was revenue recognition in accordance with the IFRS guidelines. These were unconditional purchases with delivery of goods. For example, there's a $360 million over 5-year agreement. That is near potential, but we didn't take 3.6 billion into revenue.
Okay, Likang then. How many times did you meet them?
I've met them 4 times. I've never had a digital meeting with them.
On what dates were these meetings?
It was November 2024, October 2025, November 2025, and December 2025.
And what was discussed? Business volumes, deliveries, regulatory issues?
Yeah, it's primarily market preparation. So They were preparing to launch dosimeters in China. So we had presentations from their team, how they were planning to roll it out, comparison to competitors. They had done a clinical trial. So those were purely forward-looking product meetings.
How could it be that across several meetings, it did not become clear that they had still not purchased any meaningful volumes of Intellego's products?
My purpose as chairman was to facilitate build relationships, understand. We toured their facility. We saw their presentations. We discussed with their staff, things like that.
So Klaus was basically banking on the fact that the question of the volumes would not come up. How important do you think his role is now that he's gone? Can he be replaced?
I think he has been replaced, but coffee is no longer essential. And actually, on November 18th at the Forward, not one single customer said, "Oh, really? Too bad." There's other customers who are now telling us that Klaus was a negative factor in the market, so to speak.
Oh, really? So Lumaeg is a relatively small company and depends on regulatory approvals, including FDA approval. How did you think about the risk of communicating revenue of 100 million SEK when actual payments were...
The concept was that this market is in the process of being established, and these are the players in the market space, and we needed to support them to help them establish this market and give them essentially long payment terms, which we could do because our cost of goods were so low compared to our sales price. We have such a high margin that we could afford to carry it for 1 or 2 years. So that's the concept that we worked under, that Klaus worked under, and that the board obviously was aware of and accepted, that these small companies needed to be brought along and helped along here. And once they started to sell, then of course they would be able to pay.
But to book revenue of 100 million SEK when the payments are contingent on both regulatory approval and future commercial success.
Well, it's not contingent on regulatory approval. At that time, we had no idea about that. We only discovered details about Humagus and indeed other companies after November 18th. The true nature of the agreements that Classic signed with them only came out because we had never seen those before. Those had been buried. And he had only presented these unconditional purchase orders.
So you thought the product was delivered,
Absolutely.
but they have no revenue, basically.
Correct.
So you were still banking on them having massive commercial success and putting it as revenue.
Yes. Actually, after November 18th, we spoke to the CEO and founder of Likang, and he confirmed then that within 5 years, he thinks he could sell 30 million dosimeters per year.
But you still booked it as revenue when the company still doesn't have any revenue. And so it's basically contingent on them having massive commercial success.
Yeah, over a period of time, on the payment terms for Likang, but over 1 or 2 years. And I have to tell you, the clause was, by the end there, he was even starting to extend people's payment terms, despite what the board had told him. He was starting to realize that people wouldn't pay.
But how do you reflect on booking that amount?
It's like this. If we had to do it again, we wouldn't do it. But that's because we know what we know now. And knowing what we knew, that's what we did. There was factors that gave us comfort in doing that, not least Deloitte going to those customers like Likang and saying, do you acknowledge this? Is this due and owing? And the payment terms the way they are? Answer, yes, confirmed.
But wasn't this 100 million SEK order after Deloitte's?
Could be.
So do you agree that this was aggressive bookkeeping, to say the least?
No, I don't think we were trying to be aggressive.
Objectively?
Yeah. Well, that's for others to judge.
Här pratar vi om kassaflöde, factoring och hur det kunde uppfattas av marknaden. In 2025, customer payments were not increasing at the pace suggested by the communication, while factoring was used without being clearly explained to the market. How did you think about the risk that the market would see the cash flow improvement as more natural than it actually was?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're always focused on cash flow. Every board meeting was about what kind of cash flow can we expect, can we shorten these payment terms? So that was a concern, certainly. My awareness was only that, 64 million had been put through SK, when in fact it was higher. The figure of 64 million was always thrown around. When Hans Dennerlund came in as CFO, he was telling me that he was reviewing different things, and he always mentioned 54 million. So that's sort of the size of the thing that was in my mind, anyways.
Okay, but
obviously it was 130 million.
Yeah, my perception is that the market was led to believe that this cash flow was actually natural cash flow, and it was not mentioned anywhere that the company was using factoring.
So, yeah.
Did you consider the risk that the market would perceive this as organic improvements?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not what we wanted. We wanted payment terms to be shortened down and for customers to, on their own, so to speak, pay sooner.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it was communicated in the reports that the work that we've been doing to shorten payment times has paid off.
That's how we saw it for sure. That's how we saw it at the time. My view was that, we had got one payment of 54 million. That was my assumption. It was obviously incorrect.
Mot slutet av samtalet ber jag honom reflektera i efterhand. What do you think personally in your role you should have done differently, if anything?
I'm not sure that I would do anything different here. But in hindsight, I would do everything different. I think that's the key. And what people should focus on is, what's left in this company? What value is there that can be realized from this company? There is a value there. There's a high value, and we need to realize that value. And that's not for me. That's maybe the task for the new board.
What's the reason behind the incredibly low sales?
When you see it now, in the harsh light of day, it's not embarrassing, it's ridiculous. It's absurd. We have no idea that it was like that.
Slutningsvis pratar vi om framtiden och vilka risker han ser framåt för Intellego.
But at the same time, what I have to acknowledge is that, we were in Shanghai in December meeting with Likang, and they're saying that these regulations are going to change, hopefully in the first half of this year. Every hospital in China will be required under the guidelines to use technology like dosimeters. They can sell to 3,000 hospitals. They're gearing up. When you see those numbers, you can see that the sales can take off. If Likang walks away from this, that's a problem for Intellego. And that's, I think, a big question for the new board. They don't waste their time on companies that have bad reputations or that are difficult to deal with. At some point, companies like Likang, they say, look, this is really interesting, but we don't need it because it's too much trouble. Sorry, guys.
Du har lyssnat på en intervju med Greg Batcheller, nuvarande ordförande i Intellego. Det här var hans beskrivning av hur han ser på styrelsens arbete och hur han i efterhand reflekterar över beslut som fattades. Fler samtal kommer.